Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava, page 10b, starting at the top of the page, the top of the Amud, with the words E de Belav Ihu Lo Azla, Pshita. If the fire would not have spread to another person's field without him adding bundles to the fire, it is obvious that he alone is liable for the damage, because he alone did everything that led to the damage. Rather, the case must be one where the fire would have spread even without him. The Gemara asks, but if that is the case, what did he do by adding bundles of wood? The fire would have spread without him, so he did not cause even part of the damage. It is apparent then that the Mishnah is not referring to this case. Rav Papa objects to the claim of the Brisa that the Mishnah refers only to one specific case. But isn't there also that which is taught in a Brisa with regard to a case in which 5 people were sitting on one bench and it did not break, and then one additional person came and sat upon it and broke it with his added weight? The latter individual is liable for all the damage. And Rav Papa said, by way of clarification, that this applies in a case where the last individual to sit down was as heavy as Papa Bar Abba, since he could have potentially broken it even on his own. He had no right to use it. In this case, even though the weight of the first 5 individuals was presumably a contributing factor in causing the damage, since the damage was ultimately caused by the additional weight of the last individual, he is liable for all of the damage. Seemingly, this is an additional example of the Mishnah's principle, and the Brisa should have mentioned it. The Gemara rejects this suggestion. What are the circumstances? If we say that without him the bench would never have broken under the weight of the first 5 people, then it is obvious that the last individual is liable for all of the damage, as ultimately it was his action alone that caused the damage. Rather, it must be that even without him, the bench would have broken under the weight of the first 5 people, and the last individual sat down just as it was about to break. The Gemara asks, but if that is the case, what did he do? In other words, why should he be liable at all? It is apparent then that the Mishnah is not referring to this case. The Gemara asks, ultimately, how is the Brisa cited by Rav Papa to be explained? Sof, masnisa hecha mitarza. As the Gemara explained, the ruling of the Brisa is understandable only if it is referring to a case where the bench would not have broken without him. But if that is the case, as the Gemara noted, it is obvious and therefore unnecessary to state it. The Gemara explains, no, it is necessary in a case where without him it would have broken in 2 hours, and now it broke in 1 hour. The Brisa teaches that the last individual alone is liable and not the first 5, as they can say to the last individual, were it not for you, we would have sat a little bit more and then stood up. Consequently, the bench would never have broken. Therefore, it was ultimately you who caused the bench to break, and therefore only you are liable. The Gemara rejects this suggestion, because in that situation, the last individual would have a valid counterclaim. But let him say to them, were it not for you continuing to sit on the bench after I sat down, the bench would not have broken, as under my weight alone, it would not have broken. Accordingly, we should share the liability for damaging him. The Gemara offers a different suggestion. No, it is necessary in a case where instantaneously, as he was leaning upon the other 5 people, the bench broke. The Gemara asks, if so, it is obvious that he alone is liable, as his action alone caused the damage, and the other 5 could not have done anything to prevent it as he was leaning upon them. The Gemara explains the ruling is necessary lest you say one's direct force is not equivalent to one's body. Mahu detema kocho lav kegufo dami. Lest you say that when one causes damage with one's direct force, it is not equivalent to a situation where one causes damage with one's body. If he broke the bench by actually sitting down upon it, his action would be considered a direct act of damage completed with his body, and he alone would be liable even though the other people's weight was a contributing factor. In this case, since he broke the bench by merely leaning upon the others sitting there, it is his force that led to the damage, not his body. And one might have thought that since the weight of the others certainly contributed to the breakage, they should share liability. Therefore, the Brisa teaches us that causing damage with one's direct force is equivalent to causing damage with one's body. And it teaches that the halacha is that anywhere that one would be liable if his body broke something, one is also liable if his force broke something. The Gemara continues to consider the possibility that there are additional cases covered by the Mishnah's ruling aside from the one listed in the Brisa. And are there not more cases? But isn't there also the case of that which is taught in the Brisa? If one was beaten by 10 people with 10 sticks, whether they beat him simultaneously or one after the other, and he died, they are all exempt from liability for killing him. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, where they beat him sequentially, the last individual to beat him alone is liable because he hastened his death. In this case, the other individuals contributed to the man's death, but the last man alone is liable. Why didn't the Brisa also mention this case? The Gemara explains the Brisa is not speaking of one's liability to receive the death penalty, only of one's liability to pay damages. And if you wish, say, instead, that the Brisa is not speaking of an issue that is the subject of a dispute. The Gemara asks, but isn't it? But didn't we uphold that the case stated in the Brisa concerning a pit is subject to a dispute, and it is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, but of the rabbis? The Gemara explains, we will interpret the Brisa to be in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, and not to be in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. But we will not interpret it to be in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, and not in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis. In other words, although we will interpret the Brisa as referring to a case that is subject to a dispute, that applies only if it is in accordance with the majority opinion in that dispute. The Mishnah teaches, in any case in which I facilitated part of the damage it caused, I am liable for payments for restitution for damage it caused. Chavti b'tashlumin nizko. Chavti b'nizko. I am liable for payments for restitution of the damage it caused, as if I were the one who facilitated the entire damage. The Gemara notes that the Mishnah does not teach I am liable for the damage it caused. Rather, I am liable for payments of restitution for damage it caused. The Hebrew terms payments of restitution, tashlumim, and to complete, lishalim, share the same Hebrew root. This alludes to the halacha that the payment of damages is required only in order to complete the injured party's compensation, which is already partially accounted for, as the injured party is able to recover the dead animal's current value by selling its carcass. Accordingly, one liable for the damage is not required to pay the animal's prior value. Rather, he must pay only the difference in its value from before it was damaged and its current state. The Gemara notes, we already learned this, as the sages taught in the Brisa. The Mishnah uses the term payments of restitution for damage, as opposed to simply stating one is liable for the damage caused, to allude to the halakha that the one who is liable must pay only for the decrease in the value of the animal. This assumes that the injured party is able to recover his animal's current value by selling the carcass. Therefore, the Mishnah teaches that the owner of the injured animal attends to, in other words, retains ownership of the animal carcass, so that if he wishes to, he may sell it and keep the proceeds. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? Rabbi Ami said, as the verse states, one who strikes an animal shall pay for it. Vayishalmena. Leviticus 24:18. Do not read the final word Vayishalmena, meaning he shall pay for it. Rather, read as though it were vocalized as Yishalmena, meaning he shall complete it, to teach that he shall complete the injured party's compensation, which is already partially accounted for by the injured party's right to sell his animal's carcass. Rav Kahana said that this halacha is derived from here. The verse states, with regard to a case where an animal was entrusted with a paid bailee who did not fulfill his duty to safeguard it, and the animal was attacked by a wild beast. If it be torn to pieces, let him bring a witness. The torn animal he shall not pay. Exodus 22:12. Rav Kahana expounds the verse to mean that he shall pay only up until the value of the torn animal, but he shall not pay for the torn animal itself. In other words, he pays only the difference in value between the animal before it was injured and its current torn state. If the owner of the injured animal wishes to fully recover his loss, he must sell the animal's carcass and keep the proceeds. Chizkiah said that this halacha is derived from here. The verse states with regard to a person's ox that fatally gored another's ox, he shall pay an ox for the ox, and the carcass shall be his. Exodus 21:36, meaning the carcass belongs to the injured party, the owner of the gored animal. And similarly, the school of Chizkiah taught in a Brisa. The verse states, and the carcass shall be his. Exodus 21:36. The verse means the carcass belongs to the injured party. Do you say it belongs to the injured party? Or perhaps it belongs only to the one liable for the damage? To this suggestion, you should say it could not have been that. The Gemara asks, what does the Brisa mean by it could not have been that? Lo kachaya. Abaya said, if it enters your mind to say that the animal carcass is the property of the one liable for the damage, let the merciful one write, he shall pay an ox for the ox, and then be silent and state no more. Why do I need the verse to continue, and the carcass shall be his? Conclude from it that the carcass belongs to the injured party. And at this point we are running short in time, so we will conclude part 1 of 10b and continue with part 2 of 10b in the video to follow.